Hello again everybody, and a very warm welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be beginning a new tutorial series focusing on the Boeing 787-8 but also the -10 in Microsoft Flight Simulator. The 787-8 of course is the Kuro 787, the links for which will be in the description down below, and this tutorial series will focus on the -8 but also will work just as well for the -10 part of the Microsoft Flight Simulator's Premium Deluxe Edition. It is worth noting though, if you're watching this and wondering, you do need Premium Deluxe and the 787-10 in order to be able to currently enjoy the Kuro 787-8. We're going to take her on a little flight from Heathrow to Manchester Airport across a number of episodes focusing on a lot of the features to help you get confident with the aeroplane and complete a full flight with as few hiccups as possible. So hit like and subscribe, share any thoughts, tips and tricks in the comments below, and we'll dive straight in. First things first, it's worth noting that currently there is no SimBrief integration and you can't import your weights and things like that via the FMC. So there are a few things that we need to kind of think about. Primarily, to begin with, we're going to look at creating a SimBrief flight plan. Now I'm displaying it via the New Sky client, which is the virtual airline client we use here at Osprey Airways on the British AvGeek channel. But you can go to simbrief.com as well and pull the same data across. So we're going to be looking for a couple of figures. We're going to be looking at the estimated takeoff weight, landing weight and zero fuel weight. We need to think about our cost index, our block fuel, and our reserve fuel as well. Once we've got all of that information, we can begin to think about loading it into the aeroplane. For that, before you go to any kind of settings or turn the aeroplane on, we may as well just go straight into weight and balance. You can use either the sim menu before you spawn in, or the drop-down UI menu, or those of you with Parallel 42's Flow Pro, like the one that I've got here, you can set a widget to access the weight and balance menu via that. So that's what we're using today. I've got hybrid set up so we can flick between litres and kilograms. And having looked at our flight plan just a moment ago, we know that we need 9,178 kilograms of fuel. Currently there's over 50,000, so let's empty the center tanks and we'll drop it down to about 38 to see what we get. 12,89865. So let's keep it going down. Try 26, 8802, not quite enough. So we'll keep scrolling the wheel until we get as close as possible. I'd rather go too high than too low, so in this case we're going for 9479 instead. And then we need to think about our payload. Now via your SimBrief flight plan you'll also find a payload field, certainly on simbrief.com's dispatch page, and we want to take that total figure. So in this instance today, payload is currently 13,762 kilograms. We want 25,670. That's as close as we can get. We can change some of these figures by scrolling down and just kind of editing them as and when we see fit. But near enough perfect is good enough for me. And that now is going to display your total weight currently. At the moment it's set to, rounded up or down to the nearest tonnage, 155 tons. That's our weight and balance done and our fuel. So, looking into the overhead panel, if you don't have your external power shown available, you want to call a ground power unit. It should come on automatically if you're at a gate, but if not, you should, if you've got things like GSX, be able to bring the menu up, go to additional services and request a GPU. We've already got one because we're at a stand, so I'm going to go ahead and begin boarding. We're going to turn the external power on. Take your time clicking them because it can take a little while. And we can pop the battery on as well. Beginning at the top, we'll pop the flight deck door power on and we'll put the primary left and right, forward and side window heats on as well. Some of the things in AAU2 included now are things like the emergency lights, which might be off for you. So have a little look at that. Make sure it's armed and then the guard is closed. IRS left and right can be flicked on. Currently the APU is off, we'll leave that off for now, and the gens are already on at the moment but with no power to them. Hydraulics can go on to automatic, and we can think about adding fuel in if we need to, turning the fuel pumps on, but we'll do that prior to pushback. Recirc vans, you can either leave them off until after engine start, or you can just turn them on, depending on what you want to do, and you can put packs on automatic as well if you want to. Then we're going to make sure the nav lights go on down the bottom here. Then we can go ahead and set the aircraft lighting up to our own preferences, and also the time of day that we might be flying in. So up the top here, lower displays and contrast, glare shield, lighting, overhead panel lighting, so on and so forth. Okay, that's done. Now we're going to think about planning for our flight plan and our route. So down onto the FMS then, we'll turn attention here. We're going to look at the Perf Init page initially. We're going to punch in our departure airport, our reference airport for the IRS, so that is EGLL for now, and you can see our current GPS positions pretty much match up to where we're at as well. Head over to the route page, and we're going to go Echo Golf Lima Lima for today's flights, and then Echo Golf Charlie Charlie for the destination. Flight number is whatever you're going to be operating on today. For me, we are Osprey 103, scheduled service up to Manchester. And then we can activate the flight plan and begin prepping for that. So we'll execute it, click next page, and we're going to initially put in our route. So on our EarthP we can find the route, in which case it's Umlaut Tango 418 to Welling, Tango 420 airway to Elvos, and then the Elvos 1 mic arrival to Manchester, expecting the ILS runway 23 right for the approach. So we're going to pop Umlaut into the FMS, the 2 page. It will give us a direct to Umlaut. Then to insert an airway, we're going to go Tango 418 to Welling. Take your time doing this, as always. Make sure you're spelling the waypoints correctly, otherwise you might find that you're going somewhere else entirely. 420 to Elvos, and then that's it, so we'll hit done. We can now head over to the Perf Init page. It's already sensed 9.5 tons of fuel, happy days, and we can click that button once. It will load our zero fuel weight into the scratch pad, and we click it again to insert it, and then it will display our gross weight. It's rounded it up slightly to 155.1 tons. Thinking back to when we were discussing our fuels, we've done our block fuel now, but we're also now going to think about our FinRes Plus alternate, our reserve fuel. Today it's 4.7, so we'll insert that, and then we'll add reserves into there as 4.7 tons. Cruise altitude today on the short sector is always flight level 180 currently for this route. We'll execute that like so, and we can add the cost index in at 30, and you can see it's displayed a cruise central gravity of 6.0%. Now before we think about the thrust limit page and configuring for takeoff, there are a few things that you can do to help you plan your performance calculations. I'll put the link to it in the description down below, but in effect you want to load up something called VAS Airplane Toolbox. It's an add-on that's free, and it's a really good performance calculator, available actually on the X-Plane forums, but it's got the 787-8 in a profile for that. Really worth having a look at, and lots of different airframes for performance calculations, from the ATR A320s all the way through to the 737s and this as well, 787-8. So we're going to head to the departure and arrivals page. We're going to depart London Heathrow runway 27 right, and we want that umlaut departure as well. Umlaut 1 Foxtrot for today. We'll execute that, and because this is an incredibly short sector, we're also going to insert now the arrival into Manchester. So for the purposes of this, we mentioned the ILS 23 right. We're not going to have a transition over the Manchester VOR, but we need the Elvos 1 Mike arrival into Manchester, and we'll execute that. We'll have a look at that later on in another episode as we discuss descent planning and a few other things. So keep your eye out for that. Once that's done, we can click back to the route page, back across to the takeoff page, and depending on what you're using for your takeoff calculations, you can put in whatever data is required for the route that you're operating today. So for this and our current weight and balance and the weather, we're going to use flap 5 for takeoff and an assumed temperature of 31 degrees. Center of gravity, we can just click it, it'll insert it into the scratch pad, and we can insert it. It's already got runway 27 right selected as our runway of use for today, and then our V-speeds begin to populate because we've added in our departure already. Before we select those, we're going to go to the thrust limit page, and we're going to have a look at the data here. So we've already put in the assumed temperature of 31 degrees, but we now have to choose a takeoff profile. What you can do is just choose the setting that you think is most suitable to your needs. Now, because we've got the D rate of 31, VAS Airplane Toolbox is actually telling us that we can do takeoff for the profile today with that D rate, giving us a TPR of 89.8%, and then we can go to climb profile 2. So we're going to get the D rate by using the assumed temperature of 31 degrees. Alternatively, you can select a different profile and look at the thrust difference there, that power setting is 76 instead by selecting that different profile. Then we're going to take off and use climb profile 2 because it does climb like a rocket, especially when you're lighter, as we are today. If you're flying long haul, then you might choose a different mode. Once we've set up the profile that we want, we can then return back to the takeoff page and select our V-speeds. We can add in our takeoff gross weight estimate, 154.9, and when we add that, you'll notice the V-speeds will get deleted. So you don't have to put that in if you don't want to, it'll take gross weight, or you can select an estimated takeoff gross weight in there and you can recalculate as you see fit. On the VNAV page, we need to look at transition altitudes. Now, depending on where we're flying in the world, the transition altitudes and the transition levels are always different. We've covered it in a lot of our VATSIM tutorials, and we talk about it in a lot of our live streams. If you're flying in the States, it's pretty much always 18,000 feet or flight level 180 for both transition altitude and the transition level. In the UK though, it's a little different. So primarily the transition altitude tends to be 6,000 feet in the UK, so we'll amend that as required. Our cruise is already in at 180, and there's a tab there called Climb Forecast. Now in this section here we can put in some of the data which we might find useful to give the aeroplane's VNAV brain, if you like, to help with calculating top climb, top of descent, so on and so forth. And you'll find that in your OFP below the legs in this wind information section here. You can take whatever data you want really. You can add top of climb winds, or you can add this climb section as well, whatever your preference might be. I know everybody seems to do it slightly differently, but for this we're going to go to 15,000 at the top, flight level 150, and we'll take that data there, 236 at 26. Like so. Then on the OFP again we can look at flight level 100, 10,000 feet at standard pressure, 227 at 26. Done. And that is our climb forecast done. We'll go back to the VNAV page, we'll click across to cruise, and then beyond that to descent. Now this is going to be more pertinent to any routes you're going to be doing where you could be in cruise for a number of hours, and then you need to work out your top of descent. But because we're going to be thinking about descent as fast as we are going to be reaching climb and cruise, we're going to put this data in now. So into the forecast tab, transition altitude, is whatever is required on the day, and the altitudes here we're going to pick out of the descent tab, so 150-230 at 30. (237.30) in it goes, and flight level 100, 228 at 24. In it goes. So thinking about the departure then, we're going to be doing this. Umlaut 1 Foxtrot departure, runway 27 right out of Heathrow to 3 DME, the London VOR 113.6. And then heading outbound 297 degrees to 3,000, 6,000 feet over the Burnham NDB. Northbound between 4,000 and 6,000 by 10 DME London, then up to Umlaut at 6,000 feet. That little grey thing there means that Umlaut is also on an outbound radial of 154 degrees from the Daventry VOR 116.4 at 34.3 DME. So if you see that on the charts, that's all that means. We find ourselves currently in the Gulf cul-de-sac on Terminal 3, London Heathrow. We're going to push start in the cul-de-sac, only one direction for that. Head out past the tower, right onto Foxtrot, right onto Bravo, taxiing down, Link 21, Link 22, and then Alpha 2 to line up 27 right. So we've gone through our Perf Init page. Our route has been inserted. Now with the departure, it's got runway selected. We've done the takeoff pages, all the legs pages, our VNAV pages with climb and descent forecast. And you'll notice a moment ago there was another option for alternate. We're not going to look into this too much, but in effect, if you had a problem when you needed to divert, you could put in an airport here, activate an alternate plan, and then do a divert now with a direct to that airfield. Really, really useful for handling with emergencies and all that sort of stuff. We're not going to touch on that on today, but we need to look at our MCP. So, as we looked at the charts a moment ago, we were talking about the Umlaut departure. We need to make sure that the flight control panel is set to 6,000, and we've got runway heading selected as well. Runway 27 right is on a bearing of 269 degrees. So we set that. And a current tip in the Kuro 787, though it might change if you're watching this quite a few months or so after the release of the tutorial series of courses, currently it's set to automatic. Now that is way too over the top. What I would suggest instead is you turn it all the way around to the other side and then click it back one notch to about 25 degrees bank angle limit, and that seems to be quite a happy place for the aeroplane in roll. 146 V2, 156 Anther 10. And our flight directors can go on, order brake RTO. Make sure your altimeter set in the relevant format. And for us at the moment, QNH is 1015. Winds at the minute at Heathrow, 190 degrees at 12 knots, variable between 150 degrees and 230 degrees. all the 9s, no cloud detected, temperatures 21 degrees Celsius, dew 0.09 degrees Celsius in a QNH 1015. Down here on the radios, what you want to have a little look at here, mind the glare, is your transponder. So we're going to have a look at that, and initially we're going to set 2000. If we're on VATSIM, we will potentially be given a transponder code or a escort code by ATC, but because we're going to be doing this IFR flight, we'll just set 2000. We're not using ATC for today throughout the video because there'll be a lot of over talking over various different things that I'll be explaining in flight, so we're just flying offline for now, but the principles remain the same. And up in the VHF comms tab up here, you can use both or three if you want to. We would set any frequencies that we have required. And we can transfer it like so. Make sure the park brake is on. It is. And with that in mind, we are pretty much ready to go. So that is your cold and dark setup in the Kuro 787-8, and the principles would also be the same for the 787-10 in Microsoft Flight Simulator. I hope you've enjoyed this first episode. Stay tuned for the next one. But in the meantime, as always, hit like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. Take care.